of Brooklyn streets, got the hustle and the muscle, but the vision sleeps. Innovation locked up waiting to be freed. We got the roots, but we gotta plant the seed. Factories silent, dreams on hold. Time to break the mold, let the story unfold. In the city that never sleeps, we're rising. Through the struggle and the grind, we're climbing. We got the fire, the drive, the vibe. New York's on the move, watch us come alive. Yeah, yeah, New York State, time to shine. From the shadows to the stars, the future's yours and mine.
Okay, everybody, welcome to State of Space in New York. How are we doing? As New York City's famous late Mayor Koch used to say. We're very excited to have a really interesting program today. We're looking forward to hearing a report from Empire Space, our good friends who do excellent work in documenting actually the state of space here in New York State. So we're gonna hear from them very soon. But I want to do a little bit of housekeeping first. Um, First things first, you are all on mute, and you will not be able to unmute yourself until until we get to the audience participation segment, when we will release that restriction. However, the chat box is open. We welcome your comments and your thoughts and your suggestions, your questions in the chat box, and we'll keep our eyes out there so that as we go along, if there are questions that surface, we can bring them forward. With that, I want to thank our sponsors. This year's the roundtable was sponsored by York Space and TMT Law Practice, where law meets innovation. Very grateful for their support to make this the roundtable successful and possible for the entire year. So thank you to them. And of course, we're coming up on a new year. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we are, of course, once again looking for sponsors. Part of being a sponsor is that you get to be featured in one of the roundtables, or at least a guest. And so if that's something that's interesting to you, we welcome hearing from you. We have a number of supporting organizations that make the roundtable happen, that are able to help us understand the world a little bit better through our collaborations with them. Amongst them, of course, Empire Space, who's featured today, but also the Global Satellite Operators Association, the U.S. India Business Council, the World Teleport Association, our good friends, New York's Space Alliance, which our friend Joe Fargnoli is the founder of, and we miss you, Joe. So we're looking forward to having you back. And our new collaboration with Nova Space. You've heard from them last month, and you'll be hearing from them on an ongoing basis. They'll be providing briefings every roundtable for the upcoming year. And with that, happy to launch us into the 2026 series. Yeah. So the 2026 series, the goal of this series will be talking about near Earth, New York. So near Earth, New York, near Earth is not a town in the state. It's actually the concept of what's happening in space near Earth, and how is New York playing with that space. So that's going to be our theme. And if you play in that theme again, we really love to hear from you. So with that, as is our norm, we're going to have a brief video. I want to tell you a little bit about the Better Satellite World campaign. We do our best to talk a little bit with our Better Satellite World campaign about why does what we do as an industry matter. You know, people sometimes think that space is just for rich folks, billionaires playing with rockets and the like, but actually space is important for us. And it's also part of our aspirations. So we're going to tune into this little Better Satellite World video. I hope you will enjoy it. Okay. Well, I realized I didn't do one thing. I didn't introduce myself. So, hi, I'm Tamara. I'm going to be your host for today, and I think I see one of our panelists here. So let's make sure that she's available. So again, I want to just kind of introduce today's session, and what we're going to do, a little different from our normal roundtables, we're going to have presentations from Empire Space. And so we'll soon turn the table over to Evan and Patrick of Empire Space. They are longtime friends of the roundtable, and they're going to walk us through their presentation in stages. But those two um, in between those two segments, in between their presentation, I should say, we will have two segments featuring companies, startup companies here in New York State who are doing really cool things. And so we'll get to learn a little bit about the state of the state space in the state for sure, but we'll get some practical examples as well. And so with that, what I would love to do is I would love to put a little spotlight on Mr. Evan Lerner. Let's do that. Hi, Evan. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good to have you. So how shall I do this? Shall I bring up your slides, or will you tell me when to bring up your slides?
Yeah,
And can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you and what you're going to talk about?
for sure. Yeah, if you could just pull up the slides and go on the first slide, that'd be great.
Absolutely. All right, let's do it.
Thank you. Um, yeah, I mean, as you said, very happy to be here. It is great to be partnered with the New York Space Business Roundtable. We've been doing this with you for a while. I think this is our third, maybe fourth, I think third presentation that we've done, and it's been great to be a part of the roundtable and to have the roundtable part of the New York Space community. So thanks for the great partnership and really happy to be here. Uh, as you said, my name is Evan Lerner. I'm a co-founder of Empire Space. I'll be talking a little bit about what Empire Space is, and who we are for those of you that don't know. Uh, so I'm joined by my co-founder Patrick Chase, who Tamara introduced earlier. He'll be speaking on a couple slides later. Um, at Empire Space, we're focused on growing the New York space ecosystem. We're a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. We've been around for around 5 years now, um, focusing on this goal. I want to, I mean, I'll tell a bit of, I guess, my story and our story. I also want to make sure that like the terminology is clear. And when we talk about New York at Empire Space, we're talking about the whole state. So we're not just talking about New York City, where we're really looking at the whole state and the space ecosystem across that state. Uh, and as far as ecosystem, I think we're pretty particular about that language because we're really looking at the entire thing, every single stakeholder, every person or organization or thing that touches the space ecosystem in New York is sort of like the people that we represent and the community that we're trying to grow. So you're able to see a figure on the bottom, and I'll speak more to this in a bit. This is sort of how we break down this ecosystem. We call this the census. I'll talk to that in a minute. Um, but we're not just looking at, like, for example, the private sector or the space companies, as some people do when they think about like the space economy. And we're not talking about maybe finance or the investors, as some people might when they think about New York. We're really looking at the entire thing. So it is those groups or those categories, but we're also looking at, on the academic side, the universities with space or aerospace programs that touch the space industry. We're looking at the student groups, the civic groups, institutions and facilities, planetariums, museums, etc. So sort of everything that touches space in New York, we're working on engaging with, bringing together, and creating a more healthy, thriving ecosystem for all of those stakeholders. Um, it's even more than I just said. So there's also, like, for example, we have New Yorkers in space, which are actually the many different New Yorkers who have gone to space. So there's tons of different astronauts or space traveling people that come from New York or have been in New York or have a substantial time in New York. Um, we're trying to engage with those people, document all of those, and then sort of differently, but still very relevant. And we can speak more to this later. All of these stakeholders are represented in the areas that they live by their legislators, right? And so all of these stakeholders have connections to those legislators, and those legislators, whether or not they know it, are also stakeholders in this ecosystem. And so we've been working on really telling that story and pulling them into the fold as well. I'm gonna, I guess, share a short story about sort of how we got here and sort of at least these 5 years from my perspective. Um, Maybe we'll have a chance to hear a bit from Pat at some point later. So for me, when this started, I'm born and raised in New York, from New York, have very strong ties to this state, and I've worked in the space industry my whole career. I went to college for aerospace engineering. My first job was not in New York, but I had a strong desire to come back, and I had a very hard time finding opportunities in this industry in New York. So I really wanted to stay at the intersection of these two things. And at least when I was looking, which was 5 years ago, it was really hard to find that. So I would sort of started a search, although I wouldn't have formalized it in that way at the time, just trying to find opportunities, or really by extension, anything space in New York. Um, Pretty early on there, I found Pat, who was passionately writing articles about the New York space uh, ecosystem, and sort of what New York space could be. We connected, and I would say we spent the better part of a year sort of continuing what became to be more formalized as a real search for stakeholders in New York. Uh, and this culminated in what we call the census, which is our database of all of the stakeholders, everyone doing anything in New York. Um, so that took us about a year. That was really our first project, although we didn't really know it at the time. We were trying to answer many other questions and putting a lot of other data together and starting other projects, which I'll speak to and which Pat's going to dive into in a lot more detail later. But this was our first big thing. And so the census today, we're at over 1,600 unique entries of the different space stakeholders, institutions, organizations, facilities, et cetera, across New York State. These are employing upwards of 70,000 people. We have like over 60 college programs in here, dozens of community hubs, et cetera. So this is actually hugely substantial. One of our first big takeaways was that there is so much more here in the New York space ecosystem than we realized when we started this search, and certainly more than most people think of when they think of New York. So that was a big takeaway for us. And so what we did is we sort of better organize all of that data, put it together in a bunch of tables, publish those on our website, empirespace.org/data. And now we've just really tried to improve the visibility, accessibility, connectivity for all of these stakeholders. And we think sort of getting this up publicly available on our website is a huge step, or at least a huge first step in doing this. So that was our first project. We've done a lot more since then. I would say like some of the low hanging fruit, or the things that were sort of obvious as far as like ways to organically grow this ecosystem are events. So we have one big event that we do every year, which is Space Week New York. We run this annually. Pat's going to speak a lot more to that later, so I'm not going to say too much on it right now. But this is sort of like our banner event. And then we host monthly events. These are more low key, like happy hour networking type events, just to bring the community together. We see these events as a really good way to really quickly improve connectivity and collaborations in this New York space ecosystem. So it's a really fast way to bring people together, much faster than we're able to do on our own. We do other things. We speak at events. We're sort of like do thought leadership, where we do a lot of research against our census and our database, publish reports on those, speak about that work, sort of our big takeaways. And through all of this, we're really, as I implied, trying to build connectivity and sort of accelerate the growth of this ecosystem in various ways. So these events are a huge part of what we're doing at Empire Space. We do other things as well. We are part of a number of organizations. Obviously, the New York Space Business Roundtable as one of them, but then there's others. There's the NASA New York Space Grant, New York Consortium for Space Technology, both based out of Cornell. These are hugely impactful organizations, or I should say consortia. And we've been running a number of really high impact projects out of these, including the needs assessment, which Pat will also speak a lot more to later. But this has been, in short, a way for us to identify the problems as the stakeholders see them in the ecosystem. Specifically for our first phase of the needs assessment, this was the private industry, or the private companies, the problems that they're seeing. And the idea here is once we really well capture the problems that the ecosystem, or that these stakeholders are seeing, we'll be able to make pathways and solutions for them to make this a healthier, better uh, ecosystem to be a part of, and to make New York space, um, or to make New York a good place to be for space companies. And so I would say that that's pretty well captures a lot of what we're trying to do, is just to make New York a great place for the space ecosystem to be. Some other things to say, while we do all of that, I would say we also often have people come to us trying to understand the census better, trying to understand our reports better. And so we're always happy to speak to people to help answer questions. We have a ton of stakeholders that are at census, but I think one of the highest value things we're able to do is connect people to those stakeholders. So often, whether it's a startup looking for an investment, and looking to be connected to a specific investor, or vice versa, investors looking for companies to invest in, we're happy to make those kinds of introductions. I would say we do that pretty often. So these are the kinds of like insights, consultation, work that we help people with. Really happy to do all of this because we see this as being largely impactful towards our goal of growing this space ecosystem. The last thing I'll say, we have at the bottom right there, I would say one of our favorite graphics. And this really captures one of our earliest takeaways, I should say, is sort of what was happening in the New York space ecosystem, and where there was a breakdown. And I would say that the biggest way to have an impact, and as we put this, essentially, we see an economic engine in New York, really around the space companies, and then sort of supported or potentially not supported by their legislators. And then there's the talent and the finance that flows in and out of those companies. And so we really saw a huge breakdown between these talent pipelines, these finance pipelines, and this economic engine. So one of the biggest things that we were doing, and that we're still doing, is really trying to improve that connectivity, connect the talent and the finance into the engine, into the economic engine of the New York space ecosystem. Um, and so everything I just spoke to, the census, the events, the project through the consortium, all of this is hugely impactful in creating that outcome. So that's just a bit on us at Empire Space. Pat will go into some of our projects a bit more in some of these later slides. I'll now pass it over to Kaylon Patterson from Patterson Aerospace, which is one of our shining New York space companies, to speak a bit about what they're doing. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Evan. I wouldn't call us shining, but I'd call us one of the companies that are here. So hi, I'm Kaylon Patterson, founder and CEO of Patterson Aerospace Systems. We have been here in upstate New York for about the last 2 years, going into 3 years. And we've been essentially working closely with the US government, specifically the Air Force Research Lab here in upstate New York, as well as with Cornell University through various programs such as the Mid-Atlantic Hub, as well as the New York Consortium for Space Technology that Evan mentioned. And that's how me and Evan and Patrick got to know each other. So long story short, we are a space sustainability company. We focus right now on space domain awareness, which is basically tracking things in orbit to ensure the safety and security of orbital infrastructure. So things like satellites, spacecraft, the International Space Station, astronauts that are there, those kinds of things. We have, in the last 5 years since our existence, essentially developed now three TRL-6 technologies, all of which focus on solving this problem. We have essentially an automated ledgering system that that builds in essential elements of cybersecurity to make sure that if somebody does something potentially harmful in orbit, that it's tracked and it's logged, so that nobody can just go in there and say, "Hey, that wasn't me." The next level of that system is a validation layer, which we actually recently built for the U.S. Space Force for the Space Domain Awareness TAP Lab out in Colorado Springs. We went out there for 4 months this year, and we actually got reinvited to come back for another 3 months to actually integrate our solution into the larger U.S. government space domain awareness platform. Um, Outside of that, we have our final technology, which is I guess the pride and joy of the NYCST, which is essentially a space-based sensor platform that we built and tested in microgravity, which is essentially a way to track smaller objects in orbit. Because to paint a picture, you have about 30 to 45,000 objects in orbit that are trackable because they're bigger than 10 centimeters, and everything else smaller than that is not trackable. And there are about 100 million objects in orbit. So we're really not even tracking a significant portion of those objects. Now, what our system does is it tracks those objects between 10 and 1 centimeter. So it allows us to have a larger grasp of the amount of data that we can collect, to know the positions of these objects so that we can avoid collisions and avoid risk to space infrastructure. Why is that important? If you're not a space person, you're wondering, hey, what does something smaller than 10 centimeters really do to a spacecraft? Well, imagine something moving faster than the speed of a bullet. That's the size of a bullet. And you could imagine how detrimental that is to national security, as well as, space infrastructure in general. Things like your GPS, now your space-based internet, all of these things are essentially at risk because of space domain awareness. That is my long story short. I don't know if this is a Q&A type platform, but I am open to questions if anybody has any. You can type them or over.
Yep,
Or
the
during-
questions are available in the chat if anybody wants to offer any questions, and we're happy to pick them up. And as well, if you didn't get a chance to ask a question while Kaylon is here, he's still here. He's not going anywhere. So please ask questions, and we can invite him back in to answer questions. Generally speaking, we try to save the last 15 minutes of the session for questions and answers. So if you think of a question down the road, please do ask. And with that, Kaylon, thank you so much for being here. I'm just having a little personal emergency here, uh, which means that I only missed half of your presentation. So, but I don't think I caught, where in New York are you actually? Where are you based?
So we're based in Rome, New York. We're actually housed at the Griffith Institute right next to the Air Force Research Lab.
Got it. Got it. I actually think I knew that. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to invite Patrick to come up to bat.
Hello.
Patrick gets to talk to this fascinating slide. Again, everyone,
Yes.
please, whatever questions you have, post them in the chat. If we didn't get to answer them in process, there will be a question and answer period at the end. But if you've got questions in real time, post them in the chat.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Tamara, for the introduction and for hosting us. Thank you, Kaylon, for presenting. You're selling yourself short there. We are very impressed by the work that you've done over the years. So just a little bit of background about me before I get into the slide here. So my name, for those who haven't met, is Patrick Chase. I am co-founder of Empire Space with Evan Lerner. His story about how we got founded it still kind of fascinates me to this day. We just kind of randomly connected over email, and then we hit it off. We're curious to learn more about New York space economy, what's going on here, what it could be in the future. Started off with some email threads, then some spreadsheets, and a lot more spreadsheets. That was eventually so much we wanted to put it up on a website. And we realized there was so much going on that we incorporated as a 501c3 so we could do some of this work more officially. And now we're approaching our 5-year anniversary. You said that at the top, camera, and I was like, wow. Or maybe it was Evan. I was just like, wow, it really has been a wild ride. So I am based up in Rochester. Evan's down in the city. My background is actually in local and state government. Evan is an actual aerospace engineer. So we bring different backgrounds and different perspectives, but we have that shared love of being New Yorkers, love of all things space, and that shared desire to see the space ecosystem and the space economy here grow. So Evan touched on this briefly in his introductory slide. This is one of the big projects that we have been working on for the last year and a half. In conjunction with sponsorship and support from the New York Consortium for Space Technology. This would not have been possible without them. And through our first couple of years, we would chat with companies, we would chat with people who worked with companies, we would chat with investors about the challenges that companies, space and aerospace companies in New York faced. And we would always get, similar kind of answers. Oh, they can't hire the right people, or oh, they can't access, funding or financing that they need, or there's issues with government regulations or costs. There's issues with connectivity. There's issues with access to research and testing. And so we knew kind of what the general categories of struggle were, but it was always anecdotal. It was always general. And we weren't able to get beyond that kind of initial, okay, companies are struggling with financing. What exactly do we do about that? So we wanted to get much more specific and much more granular with the nature of these challenges. So we developed our needs assessment. It was a fairly extensive survey. I believe at the end, it was like a 70+ question survey that we sent out to all of the companies in our census. We didn't get responses from everyone, but we got responses from a decent percentage to where we believe that these representatives are, these responses are fairly representative of the sector. There was a quick question in the chat. The y-axis is just the number of responses. So you can see relative, comparison between the number of respondents who picked one answer over another. And this survey was designed to get stakeholder informed feedback that could be analyzed as a proper data set for what these companies are actually facing in detail. So then we are able to program solutions. Because if you're not able to understand the nature of the problem, you're going to have a pretty hard time in solving it. So we asked detailed questions on a range of categories. One of them was just kind of demographic. Tell us about yourself, where you operate, X, Y, Z. But then we focused on workforce challenges. We focused on funding and financing challenges. We focused on connectivity challenges, both within the ecosystem and with state and federal government. We focused on research and testing challenges. So the full report will be published soon. It's taken us a while to sort through all the data. On the right, you'll see two of what I believe are somewhere between 50 and 60 different graphs that came out of the survey. There's a tremendous amount of data. We are hoping to finalize that and publish it soon. So we were really excited about an opportunity to kind of tease it now that it's effectively done. We're just waiting to publish it. It will exist. The full detailed report will exist as a PDF. We would be happy to send that out to stakeholders. If anyone is curious about this in the future, please feel free to reach out to us. We would be very willing to have one-on-one consultations with some of these takeaways. But I'll just kind of step through some of the major takeaways here, and then they'll reference the two graphs there over to the side. One of the big ones was access to testing. Most of the heavy duty, space economy in the U.S. Exists in the big states, Florida, Texas, California. And so there can sometimes be a lack of appropriate testing capabilities here in New York. So companies will have to send their product out of state and then have it returned here, which obviously adds significant costs, time delays, X, Y, Z. We are working through that with the New York Consortium for Space Technology. They are bringing new capabilities online at their facilities in Cornell. And this was incredibly widespread. We put a dozen different categories: vibration testing, sonic testing, chemical analysis, a whole range, radio frequency testing, all sorts of different testing options. Almost all of them had multiple responses saying that companies wanted more access to these resources. So this helps with that specific solution programming, because instead of just going to NYCST and saying, hey, we need more testing capabilities, we now have a data set informed by companies operating in New York saying that they need X, Y, and Z. And that helps them then program what capabilities they will work to bring online in the future to fill these specific gaps. One of the other areas we asked about was connectivity. And that's the first graph over on the right. It's broken out into three subgroups. The red answers are less frequent. So you go down, you get, red is never, yellow is pretty frequently. And so the first group on the left is programming with the civic sector. So planetariums, museums, nonprofits, community groups. The second group in the middle there is programming with academic groups, colleges or K-12 institutions. And then you'll see over on the right, partnering with other space companies, joint forums, collaboration events, XYZ. And in all three graphs, by far, the most common responses were never or once a year. By far, the least common response was weekly. So this is reflecting that companies do not feel very integrated, very connected, very networked with any other components of the New York space ecosystem. I mean, we didn't have the space to include it on this chart, but there was a follow-up question as to how satisfied respondents were with their connectivity within New York space ecosystem. And it just backed this up. Most companies are not satisfied with the level of connectivity that they have within the ecosystem. So that then feeds into our event profile. Where are we hosting events? Who are we inviting to these events? Those kind of questions to try to, increase this frequency so companies are networked with the stakeholders in their neighborhood or in their field that could help them innovate, could help them solve problems, could help them expand their operations or retain their operations. So that was the big takeaway in terms of connectivity. Workforce development is huge. There were a number of questions in there based on workforce acquisition and retention, things of that nature. And the companies overwhelmingly reported a need for more applicants with the right qualifications. So this is technical and domain expertise. So companies, and you'll see this is the second graph on the right. And this, unlike the first one, has some pretty clear, or unlike the research and testing takeaways, has some pretty clear differences. Companies don't really have any issues with their own internal processes. They're not reporting any issues retaining their staff once they get them on board. They don't need help internally with, refining or updating their processes or anything like that. It's the quality and qualification of their applicants. So there were follow-up questions about specific fields, expertise levels. It's been widely anecdotally provided and was kind of confirmed by this needs assessment that there was a significant need for more applicants with technical skills. So in the optics industry, needing more people who can actually work a floor and refine a mirror that will go into a space telescope. Some of the precision machining, precision manufacturing, some of those hands-on engineering skills that aren't, they're not a 6-year master's, they're not a PhD program, they're a 2-year certificate, or those types of skill sets. And what we also found, and this was one of the more surprising ones, was a significant existing and planned investment in upskilling. So companies, rather than trying to hire in new applicants, are looking to, update the skill sets of their existing workforce to fit these new needs. And eCornell, connected through the two consortia based out of Cornell, is in the works of rolling out some virtual programming. We've been working with the Intrepid Museum on an ongoing workforce development initiative. So again, this data informed by these companies will help us with those efforts. Here are the skills that are in demand, for upskilling programs, or here are the fields that companies report needing more access to talent in. So then when we go to colleges, community colleges, high schools, these are the fields that are in demand. Are you able to update or expand your programming to generate more graduates in those fields? And now we have the data to back up those recommendations. Couple of other takeaways. Federal and state regulations pose challenges, particularly for startups with low internal bandwidth. Most startups will typically have a founder or a small group of founders. You'll have some, technical necessities that people bring on board to work on whatever the core idea or the core project is. but they don't have grant writers. They don't have people who can do, hiring necessarily full time. So sometimes those regulations can pose a challenge for them. And then government funding sources are in demand. We looked at needing access to private sector or government funding in the form of contracts. All of it was in demand, but where companies struggled more was accessing those government sources. So then that allows us to go to state and federal policymakers and say, hey, companies are struggling to access some of these resources. How can we make that easier for them? So that is the takeaway from our needs assessment survey. Again, the full report will be published probably within the next couple of weeks. It's taken us a while to pull this all together. We're very excited about the information that it has provided. It's really given us some unique insights. It's confirmed some existing priors. It's offered up some new insights that we didn't really know were out there. And it really will allow us to get much more specific with programming solutions for some of these problems that we know have kind of bedeviled New York space companies for a while, have caused them to leave or have prevented them from growing, which we obviously want to stop happening. And this will allow us to be much more precise, much more efficient with how we work on solving those gaps moving forward. So I believe I am now turning it over to Maxine Hoover from one of my I love these guys. They're so cool. From the Mars Ocean Analogs.
Okay. And Maxine, you have the camera on? Here she is. Welcome to the space, Maxine.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. I'm Maxine Hoover, Communications Director of Mars Ocean Analogs, and I'm here with my partner and founder of Mars Ocean Analogs, Reed Stowe. So, what are Mars Ocean Analogs? So, Mars Ocean Analogs is a cutting-edge research and training program designed to prepare analog astronauts for long-duration space travel. And we do this by simulating Mars-like conditions at sea. These missions are hosted on the schooner Anne, which is a historic sailboat. We're actually on it right now. We're stationed out of New York City, right outside Manhattan. We're actually in Jersey City, in close proximity to the Liberty Science Center. So New York based. And what we do here is we host selected crew missions for 2 to 3 weeks at a time on the schooner Anne in the middle of the ocean. And while we've been doing these missions, our first formal missions began really in 2021. The concept was conceived back in the late 80s when Reed Stowe actually co-authored an article with Al Harrison in Ad Astra magazine, Seafarers of Today Provide a Role Model for Spacefarers of Tomorrow. He then went on to design and build the schooner and ended up going out of sight of land for over 3 years, 1,152 days nonstop at sea, largely alone. So Reed actually holds the Guinness Book of World Record for the longest nonstop sea voyage through firsthand experience, and also the record of the longest solo sea voyage, 846 days out of sight of land alone. And since then, we've been training Mars aspiring analog astronauts through these voyages. We've completed 10 voyages from 2021 to 2025, beginning in the North Carolina to Palm Beach area. We've done several voyages in the Virgin Islands, Palm Beach area, through the Gulf. I actually went on one of these voyages just last year, and it was a very life-changing experience. And the whole concept is that the ocean is the closest environment on Earth to space that we have, and it should be respected and treated as a training ground for this long-term isolation. We have done some collaborative experiments on these voyages with other space nonprofits, such as MRs. In one of our last voyages, we had body mapping practices where each person would draw a body map of themselves. We would have an off-site medical team who checked in with us, so we would collect data that way through recorded conversations and psychologist visits. And what we're really looking to do at this stage of our life, I guess we really have a lot to cover here. We've also been covered in several different press articles. A lot of the missions that we've done have been reported in the London Times, New York Times, Boat US. So we're heavily publicized. We're still going. And our mission now, our last voyage really completed in this past June. We've taken out multinational crews from 2 people to sometimes 8 people at a time. And it's really been an incredible learning experience of not just, what makes somebody really ready for that long-term isolation. Because at the end of the day, when you're going into space, you're really going into a completely unknown place. You're not sure how your body's going to react, how your how you're going to emotionally and psychologically react. So why not give yourself a chance to experience that on the sea for an extended period of time? And there's a lot of research to be made through this experience. So obviously it's the winter time. We're still in New York, so we're not currently voyaging at the moment, but we are looking for key partnerships, institutional partnerships, museum partnerships. We're looking to engage the youth with education programs, teaching people about the science behind why it's important to go to sea as a training ground before going to space. There's a lot of angles that we're looking to cover with this. But overall, it's empowerment through direct experience that we feel that the space industry can really utilize for training and evolving humanity off of the Earth. And I wanted to allow Reed to say some words as well.
Okay. Maxine is our communications director and really our executive director, taking care of all the paperwork and all the business and that sort of thing. But and she really briefed it well, but I want to stress again, back in the 1980s was when I began with the first NASA scientists that were discussing the possibility of long-duration space psychology. I joined in, and I realized my experience at sea as a sea captain, life and death adventures, going for months on end to Antarctica with a multinational crew, that, along with my lifetime of psychological yoga study, gave me an insight that they didn't have. And I've been impressing all along, we have to learn how to prepare people to go to Mars, to live in that life and death environment by putting them in an actual life and death environment where they can learn from the experience that they're having there. And I've learned so much over the years that I am convinced, how can we spend trillions of dollars preparing to go into space, and especially Mars? Our focus is almost strictly long-duration space psychology, not the close stuff, but the long stuff. That's our specialty. That's where we have the practical knowledge from experience, and we're trying to impress upon the space community. How can you send people up there who have had no experience in isolation in a deadly environment for years at a time? We have to start preparing the astronauts that want to go right now and prepare them for years until they're actually ready to go to Mars. So that's the main aspect of our program.
Yep.
It's tough. We have people that excel and say their life has changed. And we've had many people that were very positive space people who really collapsed and folded out at sea because it's dangerous and difficult out there. So
Yes.
that's our
And I also believe, what makes our program so unique is the element of the unknown, and really spending that time to really understand, your strengths and weaknesses. And often, a lot of people that come on these voyages really are not aware of what those strengths and weaknesses even are until they spend that time, until they develop that awareness. So it's a very holistic and important personal growth experience that can be directly translated to long duration space travel.
okay.
Just a really quick question. Thank you. First of all, thank you both for being here, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise. I had a question that just occurred to me, which was whether or not um, you see this as corollary value to some of the analog desert experiences that NASA does for training purposes, or is this something that you recommend even above that? And where does it sit in the ecosystem?
So we find that being on the ocean, there is an entirely new element of environmental unknown. Um, it's a step above in the sense that you deal with this, relentless environment around you that's really unpredictable in nature. When you're out in the desert, there's a bit more containment involved. You can
Safe.
it's safer, really. You can have isolated experiments. You can really build your environment around that. But when you're at sea, one example is when the boat rocks back and forth, there's no way to control that or turn it off. There really you can't do anything except allow your body to somehow adapt to that. There's really no turning it off and on. There's no and we're the way we're sailing as well. We're sailing. This is a historical sailboat, so it's almost like you deal with delays. You deal with not knowing when you're going to arrive on time. Always there's communication delays, which I know that's simulated in the other environments. But we believe that the environment in nature is completely unpredictable, and that adds an extra level of danger, but also research to be done.
Yes, and so since I've been into this since the 1980s, I'm aware of the analogs tests that are going on, and I've often spoken to the psychologists about it, and they remind me that yes, there is things to be learned in these analogs and in these safe environments. But going to Mars is a life and death experience. It's a high performance life and death experience where you're actually going to be isolated for years at a time. So when they say we learn about human behavior in an analog on the land where it's safe, where people can drop out when they want to, that's very different than learning about your behavior and crew behavior in an actual life and death high performance environment. And that's always been a statement that I've made, singling out why our program is so important for the people to take after they've done all the training and studying, find out if they can really handle themselves at sea.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We had one more question, and Kaylon has his hand up, but I'm gonna move us forward a little bit. I'm gonna get Mike's question in, and if we can answer it quickly. And Kaylon, if you can hold on just a minute till we get past the next portion, because Patrick has one more presentation. But the question that Mike had, which I think is at least valuable and as a quick answer, is how does one fund and qualify to go on one of these Mars Ocean analog voyages?
Yeah, so our next voyages, they're in the preparatory stage at the moment. He can definitely reach out. We can drop our website link below, and there's a contact form. He can reach out and ask us details about how we qualify those who are interested in going on voyages with us. So I'll drop that link below, and he can definitely reach out, and anyone else who's interested.
And it's changing. At first, we would take anyone from any analog or any space background, and we would take them because we needed to build our program and we needed to build crew members. And what we found out was that we didn't vet all of them as well as we should have. And so our program with how we're getting crew members that we take to sea is really in development right now. And when the whole space industry says, yes, it's important, astronauts who want to build their resume and be better prepared to go to Mars should go to sea. When that becomes more predominant, people will come with a different state of mind and will be able to judge the people differently as we prepare them.
Thank you so very much. All right, I'm going to invite Patrick back into the space. Kaylon, please remember your question. I want to invite you in when we have questions and answers. But I want to thank Maxine. I'm sorry, sir. What's your name again?
Reed Stowe.
Reed. I want to thank Maxine and Reed, and we'll hear from you guys later. Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. Thank you.
Hello, everybody again. Glad to be back for the final segment. Again, just thank you to Maxine and Reed. They're just a very cool. I've always been personally just a huge Mars buff. So when we became aware of them, they've spoken at a couple of our events. Just a really unique, really cool, entry in New York's space ecosystem. So we were very glad to be able to highlight them. So the final segment we're going to talk about today, Evan touched about this briefly in his opening. Among our event portfolio, the largest, especially these days by far, is Space Week New York. Some of you may have attended that before. I know some of the people on the call have attended or spoken at it before. We do have a website, spaceweekny.com. There's also our YouTube channel. It has a number of videos. Most of these sessions and events were recorded, so you're able to learn more there. We can drop those links in the chat. So Space Week New York came about because at one point we did a peer state analysis. By most NASA investment and job creation statistics, New York is about the 15th largest space economy among the 50 states plus DC. So at one point we wanted to look at those other states who are around us. Between Florida, Texas, and California and New York, you're looking at, the Colorado, Virginia, Michigan, Massachusetts. What are those states doing to grow their space ecosystem, their space economy? And in almost all of these states, there was some type of key annual tentpole event that was high visibility and was designed to really to push the entire economy and ecosystem forward. In some states, it represents itself as kind of an industry lobbying day at the state legislature. In other states, it'll be more of a symposium. In some states, it's fueled by industry. In some, it's facilitated by nonprofits. In a couple of states, state government has a very active role in these types of events. So in 2023, we had what was then Space Day New York. It was just a one-day virtual event. This was still pretty early in our goings on. We did not really have a gigantic network. I think it was a half dozen virtual events, some presentations, some spotlight conversations. Again, all of it was virtual. We had, I think, 50 or 60 attendees. It went very well at that point. It was our largest event. But it has now grown to the third event in the series that was held this past spring. It was a full week, mixed in-person and virtual programs. We had more than 500 unique attendees. And the focus is really on New York's space strengths. So what does New York do well in space? And there are a lot of industries that might be more well-known, like optics. My hometown of Rochester is known as an optics hub. We've participated in most of the major telescopes that have gone up to some fields that might be less well-known. Space medicine and space biology is low-key a significant component of New York's space ecosystem. We have a lot of very high caliber, particularly academic institutions that are doing research in this field. The Aerospace Medicine Biobank is located in Manhattan, which I didn't realize when we started this. And that has actually led into some interesting commercialization avenues and spin-offs. There are now small companies, startups operating in New York in these fields that work on, miniature biolabs for launch into orbit to be able to take some of these, lab experiments in these universities into space. A huge range of event types. We usually have an opening reception at the Luxembourg House, which really taps into New York's very unique role as a global crossroads. There are a lot of other countries, particularly smaller countries, that are looking to grow their space footprint. They have operations in New York, so the Luxembourg consulate has been a great partner. We'll do spotlight events. We've done them with, for example, Paterson Aerospace, and Kaylon did one this year. Just a virtual event, open to the public, hour long. info session, Q&A. We do a virtual town hall where Evan and I will kind of do a broad-based presentation about our findings, latest news, XYZ. We'll do networking receptions and mixers, those kind of semi-formal or informal events where people can just hang out and meet people that they wouldn't normally meet in their day-to-day operations in the space economy. And then the big event this past year was our full day. We called it our forum day. This was a full day, 9 to 5 programming in person at one of the Cornell University facilities in Manhattan. They were very generous through our partnerships with the NASA New York Space Grant to let us get into one of their spaces. We had some really informative breakout sessions where people would just get into small groups and just kind of talk about a general topic and let people get really invested in the conversation for an hour. There were some really interesting takeaways from those conversations that we weren't expecting that has informed a lot of how we've approached things since then. And then we had 4 key panels. These were expert panels. These were not us, talking out to the community. But we really did try to bring experts together in law and policy, medicine, insurance, and leadership in space, which was composed of female leaders from all sorts of different corners of New York's space ecosystem. So these were, I believe they were all hour and 15 long minute panels. They were given the stage. They developed their own focus area, their own questions. They picked their own moderators. We pretty much brought the experts together and said, space law and policy is a key aspect of New York space economy and ecosystem. You're the experts. We will give you the floor. What do you want to talk about for now? And that was really impactful. A lot of people were very responsive to that. So the point of the week is to raise the visibility of New York space ecosystem, both externally to space sector stakeholders, let people know who are operating in medicine or optics or law. Hey, there are interesting things going on in space. Maybe you want to expand your operations to include this. But it also deepens that networking within the space ecosystem. A lot of our attendees will come and just say, I had no idea. I had no idea that there was this much going on in New York. So it's really focused on what does New York do well, and then how can we help it do better in the future? How can we program solutions for some of these key challenges? So that is the long and short of Space Week New York. If you have joined us for a previous iteration, thank you very much for your attendance and support. Next year's event is already well along in the planning process. It will be at the end of April. That'll probably be around that final week of April into that weekend. Specific dates and times of events still being worked out. We'll be partnering with some exciting institutions. The Intrepid Museum is going to be a key partner for us next year. We're very excited about that. If anyone is interested in holding an event or something of that nature, if you have a programming suggestion or a possibility, please feel free to reach out to us. This could be, you represent, a startup company that's trying to raise its visibility. We can very easily schedule, a virtual spotlight and add you to the calendar. If you're an expert in one of these issues, hey, I do space medicine, or hey, I work for a law firm and I know some of the ins and outs of space regulation. We can add you into one of those expert issue areas. So we're always looking for new participants, new sponsors. So again, check out the website, spaceweekny.com. Full videos, like all of the panels, all the virtual spotlights, existed video form on our YouTube channel. So you're always free to check things out there. It really has turned into one of our most prized creations, I guess would be the right word. I was reflecting earlier on where we've come in the last 5 years. And if you had told me, and I believe I speak for Evan too, when we first started, that we were going to be able to pull off an event like we were able to pull off earlier this year, a full week, high wattage sponsors, high wattage locations, really impactful topics, really impactful conversations that brought hundreds of people together, again, to really move New York space ecosystem forward. It really was a fantastic week. Kavanch there from the Luxembourg House, fantastic partner there. So you see some photos there on the right. I believe the top two and the bottom left are from the space at Cornell. You see the panel set up. You see the networking area there. And then the goofy one on the bottom right is just Evan and I taking a chance to relax. At a closing reception we had that weekend at a supporters place up in Harlem. So some of it is very structured, very formal, like let's get after some of the meat of this. Some of it is, hey, we all love space. Let's just hang out and have a party. And everything in between. So that is kind of our big event. If you have participated, again, thank you. If not, stay tuned for updates heading into Space Week New York 2026, which will be at the end of April next year. So that is my blurb on Space Week New York.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And I will say that we were very happy to have SSPI Rise also participate. I'm going to take the floor for just a minute. We're at 1:02. This session is scheduled to end at 1:15. So in a very short amount of time, I'm going to allow everybody to unmute and ask questions. But first, I would just love to bring up the last little bit of what we wanted to do as part of our agenda today. So if I can find my, there it is. Okay, so SSPI used to have something called the Northeast chapter. That is our actual logo right there for the SSPI Northeast chapter. And the nature of the industry around New York City specifically undermined the basis of the chapter membership up until that point. And so we are now at a place where we've been part of this movement inside of the state. And we've also had the New York Space Business Roundtable since the pandemic. This year, we were very happy to launch hybrid format, and we want to continue that next year. So we've been able to start cultivating friends in the community again and start looking at the shape of what the industry is. And we want to get back to having an actual chapter, not just a roundtable. So what I'm inviting everybody to look at here is what is the Northeast from the standpoint of SSPI. So of course, the Northeast chapter was always very, very much focused and mostly localized around New York, particularly New York City, but not exclusively. We also had a strong contingent in New Jersey, Connecticut, and even Pennsylvania. Some of the major companies that play in space and satellite, especially at that time in the broadcast industry, were around these areas. Sometimes even Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and as far as Ontario and Quebec, all participated in the SSPI Northeast chapter. So why does this matter? Obviously, we've been talking about the New York state and the ecosystem that's being built. But as is true with any ecosystem, you also want to have connectors out. And so the Northeast chapter kind of centers the New York ecosystem in its wider context of the entire region. If you are interested, chapters within SSPI are volunteer opportunities. They're opportunities to be front and center and engaged. If you're interested, I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love if you just drop your email in the chat so I can follow up with you, because we want to build out the chapter again, and we want to think about what it's going to look like, how it's going to meet. I can tell you that I've already clued in Patrick that one of the things we'd love to do during Space Week New York, this is a little pet project of mine, is have mini golf up in my area, which is the Hudson Valley. So if anybody wants to help organize mini golf in the Hudson Valley, let me know, because that would be such a cool way to say, hey, the Northeast chapter is back. And so with that, just a couple more quick announcements. SSPI Wise is really looking forward to welcoming everybody on the 22nd of January for its first meeting of the new year. New orbits, new rules, ringing in the new year of space and satellite governance. We've got panelist Dr. Alice Bunn, International Director of UK Space Agency, and the UK Space and Satellite Personality of the Year. Karen Cox, Chief Corporate Affairs Officer from Leo Labs, and Laura Stefani, managing partner and founder of Trail Finding Regulatory Solutions. So this is SSPI Wise doing something awesome. And we hope you'll be able to join us. And of course, I always do the little plug for Mastering the Business of Space. Apparently, the Space Agency of Dubai, I think it was Dubai, recently just got all of their folks engaged with Mastering the Business of Space through using Space Business Qualified. It's a great way to make sure that you're successfully onboarding people who may be in the industry but not have a broader sense of the industry. And so if you're interested, the URL is www.spacebq.org. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I am going to remove the restriction on remove the restrictions on speaking. So I want to go back to Kaylon. Kaylon, you had a question, so if you want to just pop right in here and ask your question, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. My question was from Maxine, but it was very similar to what was asked already. So essentially, I know sometimes these analog programs do have a cost attached to them, and I just wanted to know if that information was available.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah, so if you're interested in learning about any sort of costs, you can definitely just reach out to us directly. We, as Reed mentioned in our earlier speech, things have been kind of been in a restructuring phase at the moment. We had a series of volunteer-based missions, and now we're looking to structure it in a bit more of a, costly way. Obviously, there's a lot of operational costs and, things involved in running this big schooner. But yeah, that's something, if you're interested in finding that out, just please shoot us an email and we can get back to you accordingly. It's not publicly available online at the moment. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. The floor is open. Any other questions?
I just wanted to note, Mohammed Islam had mentioned the CCNY planetarium. We actually, one of the Space Week New York 2025 events that we did was a planetarium roundtable, where we actually invited the facilitators or the managers of all these different planetariums together. This was a closed group; it wasn't open to the public, but we really wanted to get them together and talk about what are your challenges, what are your issues, to help them identify some potential solutions, new sources of funding. There's actually a dedicated channel, the New York Space Slack channel that we run that is just for the planetariums. They've shared some programming ideas back and forth. So that's a group that we have engaged. We hope to grow and do something like that again this year. So I just wanted to shout out that comment from the chat.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's see. I see comments in. Okay, yeah. So Muhammad says, thank you. Okay, we're at 1:10. I've got 5 minutes left if anyone wants to jump in and say anything. And again, I do want to hear from folks. Like I said, I left away the headline. The cool thing about the mini golf, why I want to do mini golf, and I should say that the Northeast chapter is actually famous for its golf outing. It's regular golf outing. We used to have a golf outing, and it'd be nice to bring that back. But the mini golf is space themed, and I'm like, okay, I have to do that, and I need some space nerds to do it with me. So, y'all, let me know if you want to do this with me. I would love to have everybody. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Or do I give you back your 5 minutes?
I just wanted to say real quick for the group, the links to Space Week website and our YouTube channel are in the chat as well, as are our email addresses. It's nothing complicated. It's just patrick@empirespace.org or evan@empirespace.org. Always feel free to shoot us a message if really about anything. We're pretty approachable. We don't really gatekeep, so we're always open to new connections, new ideas. Moving forward.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to ask everyone to just help me thank Patrick and Evan for their outstanding presentation. It was really, really genuinely beneficial to really learn about what's going on in the industry, where our needs are, and how we build out the ecosystem within our state. And I want to also invite thanks and congratulations to both Maxine and Kaylon for their excellent presentations. And we look forward to hearing more great things from Patterson Aerospace and Mars Ocean Analog. And with that, thank you all for being here and have a wonderful, SSPI contact. Yes. Well, okay. I take that for granted.
Cameron, while you do that, I'll just jump in with the Empire Space. Thank you. Thank you to you and the roundtable for having us. We've been partners now for a number of years. It's always great to come here and chat with folks. Thank you to Kaylon, Maxine, and Reed for joining us as guest presentations. We're always happy to spotlight awesome things happening in space that aren't ours. Like we genuinely are very excited by some of the cool work that's happening here. And we always enjoy a chance to spotlight awesome work like that that's going on. So we just wanted to extend a thank you to everyone who joined us, everyone who participated, everyone who watches in the future on YouTube.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. I hope you have, if you're celebrating Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. If you are getting ready to celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy Advent. If you're a Kwanzaa celebrator, then, have a happy Kwanzaa and Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2026. Take care, everyone.